Dale Dupree, here we go. And you were helping me out. I'm going to push this episode live, unedited. So you will hear all of my breathing, my ums. The levels will be, I think they sounded pretty good from when we started. But Dale, it is awesome to see you. And before I let you say hello, I will start with I am Mike Simmons. Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. I have Dale Dupree on the episode today. This show is intended to help you find your catalyst, that nudge, so that you can take that next step and start doing the work you want to do. Dale, it's great to see you. The last time we started to record, I think you were feeling a little sick or something, and you tried to do the voice of the angel, which was like, ah.
Don't you still have that record? I mean, we did something awesome actually that day where like because of the lighting and where you like
That's what it was. You know what? That's what it was. It was the lighting.
Yeah, it was a fantastic moment. But yeah, I was like
sure.
I was a little off my game that day, a little behind and a little icky feeling, but all is well today, man. All is well. And for those of you that can't see, I'm wearing a hoodie because I live in East Tennessee, not to be mistaken with Tennessee. And it's a little cold out here. It's like, I think it's still in the 70s up here. It might be 60s, but this morning it was 47 degrees. It's literally 69 degrees right now. It's fantastic weather. I love this.
It might break 100 today out here. I don't know if it will or not. No, right now 94. Looks like we're going to get up to about 97. And I'm sure, just like every other call that we start, isn't that the best way to start a call when you're building rapport with people? Just ask them about the weather.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Because it's so interesting, but really it's a game of like who has the better weather. And if you live in a place where you experiencing the same weather, it's more of a being thing. It's like, how about the weather outside today? Geez, why do we live here? But yeah. I mean, yeah, I think literally we could stop the podcast right now. That should be the catalyst for everybody. That ask about the weather when you first talk to someone for the first time, and they'll give you anything you want, whatever you desire.
So what's your favorite cold call opener, since we're talking about fun stuff?
I don't have a favorite cold call opener because this is the thing, right? Is that some people look at a cold call opener as a talk track, and I don't, and I think that about me, right? Like, although I have some pretty fun ones like, yo, this is a sales call, but thankfully I'm not peddling your car's extended warranty, automated messages, and I'm not calling about a timeshare, for you and your family to come stay at for quote unquote free. So like, I like the idea of using things that people have typically experienced at some point in their life that correlate back to negativity that make you laugh a little bit ultimately, because it's life is better when you're happy, and happiness stems from a feeling, and that feeling can ultimately come from humor as like the most centric place that it can form out of, and it doesn't necessarily form out of, hi, this is Dale and I have an automation software I want to show you. People aren't suddenly like, oh my god, I think the greatest thing just happened to me. I need to call my mom and let them know that Dale's on the phone with an automation software, right? So, but I will say my favorite cold call opener, quote unquote, that is rebellious, and the Dale version is something like a crumpled letter, right? When for the first time that you've ever heard from me or that you've ever interacted with me, you get a piece of paper that's either balled up, and it literally like into a little piece of trash, or it's in an envelope that's all wrinkled up, or it comes in a literal trash can. Hey, maybe it's even like in a dumpster, maybe I had a dumpster literally delivered to your office full of these little crumpled letters, right? But ultimately you open it, it says something that's hilarious. It fights back against the stereotype of sales. It helps people have a much more clear vision of what it is that you desire to accomplish with them. And it doesn't sell people. Instead, it attracts people, and it makes them feel welcome, warm, and really that they're being seen and heard throughout the process and not just forced into a 30-minute meeting. So if we're talking about favorites, that would be on the top of the list.
So let's talk about where the crumple letter came from. Like, what's the origination of the crumple letter?
Yeah, there's a guy in South Florida. This is the cold hard truth, right? As they say, there's a guy in South Florida at the time. He was doing real estate, And I don't know if he's actually from South Florida or if he was just being interviewed by somebody in South Florida. That's the one part I could never really put my finger on. But and this dude wrote articles and helped the direct mail world for like the next 7 years. But this was like 2002, 2003 timeframe that he basically was mailing out these form letters that were like, hey, your house has been on the market for 90 days, and because of that, I'm mailing you because I can help you sell your house faster. He's one of those guys that had a formula back in the day that he knew how to get to buyers quicker without using like all the scam of the MLS and people just thinking that naturally someone will buy your home, right? Because it's for sale, right? So he had some secret sauce, right? And the thing was, is he got like less than a 2% return. I think it was less than a 1% return, actually, if I really think back to it. But the story was fascinating because what he did is he was like, what the heck? Why does nobody answer or open these? Like, they need me. And so what he was doing is he actually put a little note on them that would say, don't throw me away again. And he'd send them back out, like a second iteration of them. So it was kind of like this idea of like a crumpled letter, right? Where he was sending something like, hey, you threw this away last time, but don't do it again, right? It's because it has purpose. And I remember hearing that and thinking, wow, that's clever. And it feels a little bit like a gimmick, but it actually ties back to something stronger than what a gimmick technically is, because it has a value proposition with it instead of just like a take a meeting from me, right? It's actually like a, hey, when you threw this away before, it was because of these reasons. Like in my mind, when I put it together, like you get a bunch of crap in the mail, right? But this one is actually important. And so it's been resurrected from the trash and shown back into your mailbox because, that's because God exists and he cares about you and he wants you to read this thing, right? So for me, it was a cool moment to kind of realize, but the other side of it was that I thought, especially at the time, this was 2007 when I had first started in the industry, 2008 when I really started learning from some of these people that were out there, because I had these crazy ideas of doing business cards that were like 11 by 17 sized, instead of your standard. And I was like, do people do stuff like this? And started looking around. And he was one of the first people that I had found that was doing something very interesting. And so I kind of put together my own version of it, which, is the crumpled letters. So it's not like, for me, it's an original idea out of my own mind that I used. The catalyst was somebody else saying like, hey, I made this work. And then me saying, yeah, that's great for the real estate world, but what about the B2B world? And how can I nuance this? So the crumpled letter is actually a campaign of 4 to 8 letters, depending on, who you are in our system or what you want to do with your campaigns, because you need more than just one touch, right? Ultimately. So for every letter, there's also 3 touches tied to it. So every letter is like 4 touches. You do 4 times 4, you got 16 touches. And the thought process behind what I put together was I want to create consistency, but in a pleasant way, instead of just banging the phone and emailing the crap out of people. Instead, I want to give them an experience that they wouldn't forget.
Why do we struggle with this whole experience thing? Like you one of my favorite quotes is the Marie Antoinette quote, there's nothing new but what has been forgotten. And then there's different iterations of this. They get into things like Newton and standing on the shoulders of giants. And he stole that quote from somebody else. But there's this level of creativity and innovation that comes together when we focus back on the fundamentals and we take things from other areas and we apply them in new places. Why, as sales leaders, do we stifle creativity and innovation across our teams, or not empower our teams to be creative or innovative?
So a lot of people don't see creativity as something that's scalable, first off, but secondly, it's not something that they can control ultimately. So and that's the problem, right? Like, people don't like losing or giving away control. And so the other side of that too, Mike, that I would say for anybody listening that's thinking, well, that can't be the only 2 reasons. The other reason would be that it's risky, right? Because of those 2 reasons, but ultimately because, let's say, you're on your 50th letter response, right? And it's bad, but the other 49 were good. Leaders immediately typically go, oh, geez, we have to stop this. Like, we can't do this anymore. Right. I remember a long time ago, one of my bosses, he saw an amazing piece of advertisement that I did for Orlando City Soccer Club, they were a group in Orlando. They're an MLS team now that was a USL team at the time, had just come to town. My dad and I were still running our business. I went and said, I want to be a sponsor, and I want to also I want to sell you copiers. I want to be a part of this whole thing. I want to go all the way to MLS with you, so that when we got bought, the people that bought us, they kind of got like literally raptured into the agreement, and were grandfathered into MLS with it. And I was so freaking stoked because I thought, oh, dude, we're gonna like our advertising isn't just gonna be like for the club now. Like people outside of the club are gonna see it. Like this is gonna be big. So I came up with this amazing idea that I still love to this day, where it was a guy streaking across the soccer field, and he was a little bit older, and it was kind of gross looking, and but on the streaking of the print there were also streaks running through the print, right? And literally that was the advertising, right? It was like no streaking allowed, and it was like on the field or off the field when using your copy machine, right? It was so freaking good. But I took it to them, and one of the owners like immediately said, someone will be offended by this, even if just one person, and because of that we can't do it. And to me, that in my mind, bro, that is like one of the biggest things that holds organizations back from hitting that ultimate growth that they desire to have. And it goes back to control ultimately. So regardless, like we could probably concoct like two more problems, right? But ultimately it falls into the category of control. When people don't have control over something, that they don't like it. And because it's never been done that way, right? It's weird and it's risky and there's no control there. And so we're just not going to do it. We're just going to keep doing it the way that we've done it. You need to adopt our mindset and adapt to our methodologies, or get out and we'll find somebody that will.
You mean there's some people who wouldn't buy into the idea of a cold call while you're driving, while you're flying Red 5, getting ready to go after the Death Star? Like somebody wouldn't think that that was good inside an organization, yet it can happen.
Yes.
If you haven't seen the Vidyard videos, I think those were Vidyard, right? Was that who that was the partnership?
It was Tyler Lesser and the Vidyard team, and Will Aiken and myself and a couple other people, actually, Chris whatever his name is. There's a ton of people, and
you got cold called
Star Wars thing,
while flying an X-wing fighter.
Yeah, and there was a few. There was like the Mandalorian was in one episode, like getting a cold call from side. There was some pretty good ones. But yeah, I was Red 5. Actually, I was Porkins, I think, if I recall correctly. Getting shot up from behind and blown up. But yeah, it was a good time.
I wonder if it's not more risky to just do the same thing that everybody else does.
It is like that's the thing about it, is that it's insanity to think that stepping outside of the box is any riskier than just doing the same thing as everybody else, because ultimately what you're actually living in is mediocrity and stagnation. Even if your growth is like, oh, we had a 10% growth year, or we're having our biggest growth year yet, my question to that always is the same. I go, yeah, well, when was the last growth year? And what was the last growth year? And over the last 5 years, what did it look like? Well, of course you're having the biggest growth year yet, because for the last 7 you sucked. And so of course there's going to, at some point the walls will break. And because of all the quantity and whatever else, you're going to have some type of breakthrough at some point, no matter how you spend that. But the real game is creating influence through the methodology that we talk about at the Sales Rebellion, and letting people literally be present with what you're doing, because it's so different. Like they'll just show up because it's different. People took appointments with me just because they were interested to meet me, because they never had ever gotten anything like what I did to them. I swear to you, I met with some people that literally, when we sat down, they said, listen, I know I kind of baited you here, but like I have no intention of leaving my current provider, but you are so different. I had to know you. And honestly, to me, it was almost like I was doing something like sneaky because of that, right? Or like, wrong. It kind of felt like it was like, I am meeting with people that like have a relationship, like they're cheating on their incumbent to come over here and have lunch with me real quick. It's like how it felt. Even it was almost like, please don't tell anybody you've been here, kind of thing. But ultimately those turned into some of the best relationships, because what those people were truly looking for was more than just a vendor. They were looking for somebody that would provide impact, that would fix problems, that would think outside the box, and that would go a little above and beyond. And that's, I think, any company out there that's buying anything would prefer to have that as the outcome, as opposed to just like, yeah, we bought some software, right? Like, and sure, the software might work for a couple months, and then when it doesn't, or you need, further help in understanding it, or your rep is gone. And this is the same story across the board everywhere. And it's because we continue to do the same crap over and over again and expect a different result.
Over and over again. And people are starved for authenticity and transparency. And a lot of times these words get overused. And I go back to like the Princess Bride, where we're using these words and we don't know what they mean, like authenticity or transparency or empathy. But what I found is when I'm engaging with people the same way that I do anybody else, those conversations tend to lead to good things, or at a minimum lead to some kind of next step that might mean that they're exiting or we're exiting. So it's just that we're starved for authenticity and transparency, yet we're also at the same time trying to find the next trick or thing that's going to help us get in the door or get through. Why is that fair? I mean, would you say that we're
Yeah, for sure.
starved for authenticity and
You said
transparency?
something interesting in there that I think is a big piece of the puzzle of why we do what we do and why I quit my job and became a founder for a startup, which was never in the cards. I didn't ever have to do anything like this to have any kind of success in the first place. So this is more about like what kind of legacy are we leaving, and me that I'm leaving ultimately, and how are we helping and serving a community that really is lost and broken and needs help. And I think that the authenticity thing is a huge piece of that puzzle. But ultimately, this is how I see it: is that you were talking about how people like they don't understand words, or like as I see it, they take something like empathy because they're looking for the hack, the next thing that will help them. And ultimately, like why somebody goes out and looking for something like that is because they want more success. They want growth. They want to see what's going on these days. And no one can just think for themselves anymore, which is kind of a crazy thought to me in some instances. But a lot of people, because they desire something more, they're going and looking for the shortcut to get there instead of just trying or believing or like going to their own sales reps instead of a guru and just saying like, hey, you're out in the field, like what do you think we should do different? And to me, like it's just nuts. Like I love it when people hire the sales rebellion and we come in and we help and we serve them, but ultimately like we want to leave at some point, right? We want to help, but we want to get out because we want your people to just be like, yeah, we've learned everything that we could, and we're 60% growth this year at this branch, and it's the most we've ever had. And we see it, an avalanche effect happening. Thank you. Like for us, it's like awesome, peace, right? But the thing is that most people they can't think like that in the first place. They can't think like, how do I serve, right? And just like help someone fix a problem and move on. They think, how do I make a ton of money and get people to keep buying from me? And because of that, when you see a word like empathy, like you said, it becomes the hack. And that's not what it is. Like empathy is ultimately is a natural state of human behavior. And if you can have that natural state of human behavior, it will literally make an effect on people and have a positive outcome because of it that goes beyond money in your pocket and a product in the other person's. It goes way beyond it. It becomes intrinsic as far as the value is concerned, just as much as the extrinsic that we provide for people. And ultimately, I see over the last couple of years, especially, I see like 80%, if not more, of the sales world just in a big state of failure, in my own opinion. And I know that's a lot, and people might listen to that and be like, what? Like, how so? Like, listen, just go talk to 10 sales organizations and ask them, to see behind the curtain, show you, right? But if you could see behind the curtain, bro, I mean, it is gross what's going on back there. And most of the time, every single person that you would talk to will be faking it until they make it straight up. Well, things look pretty good, but we're kind of having some issues. Maybe you can help us, right? Or, like, this is what it looks like back here, but we're not worried about it because like if we just kind of keep going, we'll get to an outcome, right? It's like, no, that there to me, there's a lack of clarity, there's a lack of discipline, there's a lack of leadership, there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of servant leadership. And because of it, it's why, like you said, people they misunderstand and misinterpret words. Everyone's all out there looking for, even though everyone's fine and growing and doing well, they're all out there looking for the next hack, the next thing to make them more money. And it's a bad attitude altogether.
It's a horrible attitude, and really there are no quick fixes. There are no shortcuts here. You've got to do the work, and you've got to figure out what work works for you, what work works for your clients. And the only way that you can do it is if you actually do things and then pay attention to the feedback loop. Like, you've got to observe. You can't be thinking about what's next if you're going to learn, because you're distracted. You're now caught up in something else. You're now looking for something, some other kind of your trigger or whatever. You hit on a key piece there, the leadership challenge inside organizations. The leadership challenge that we've got inside organizations around, one, are we enabling leaders? Are we preparing leaders to lead well? Two, do those leaders know what it means to lead well? Three, are on the enablement side, are we actually creating more and more distraction that pulls them away from leading well, because so many companies are funding not through customer acquisition, but through venture capital that they're bringing in? Any thoughts on that?
I just think that we're convoluting the whole process with all the outside money, the outside opinions, the loss of control. The sales rebellion is bootstrapped, and it is for a reason. Like, if we had a board and a bunch of people telling us how to make more money, or that we had to make more money, because that's all they're really telling you. You need to make more money. You need to change the strategy and make more money. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to read this book. You need to watch this webinar. You need to go to this sales training class. I mean, and then ultimately there a lot of egos get involved, right? Like, somebody steps in and goes, well, I'm the CEO and I know what's best, and this is what we're going to do. Or a sales leader that's been tried and tested and understands, like, well, we're going to market like this. And there's, like, nobody has humility anymore inside of the startup world, especially. Nobody has humility anymore. Everybody's just like, I got a great idea and I want to make a lot of money. And to me, it just convolutes everything. Like, there was a post the other day by a big influencer, and you might have seen, like, if somebody saw my comment, they might have seen, like, me, like, over exaggerating something or being a little bit too passionate, but really, like, I hate it when people say things like, the people at your business are not your friends or your family. That's the attitude that started back in the early 2000s, late 90s, that's carried over into 2022, that has created damnation inside of the business world in the first place. My dad ran a business all the way to 2012, and it was a big family, and beyond, like, the employees, right? When my dad passed away, the majority of people that came out to his funeral were clients or people that had worked for him, right? And think about that for a second. Like, half the people at your funeral, and there's thousands of people at it, are people you sold something to, right? How many salespeople could say that they know that the people that they sell to are coming out to say goodbye when they die, right? That's a crazy thought. And so for me, like, we've just taken this completely different stance on business and said, no, business is a thing that makes money. Well, of course it makes money, right? But the people that make it money are human beings. They're not robots. They're not animals. They're not this weird thing from outer space that we just found on a flying rock, right? They are human beings, right? And ultimately, the only reason you have a successful business is because a human decided to give you money, right? You might have had a good idea, but somebody else bought into it ultimately and paid you for it, right? That's a person that gave you that, and they could take it away anytime they want to, right? So to me, like, we have just completely disconnected the humanization element of what business is, and because of it, we're in the mess that we are. And we have the disconnects of business that we do, and we let things like the guys giving us all this money dictate the success ultimately. And bro, it's why you see so many, we both see it, right? Because we're both very attuned to that world. You see so many people saying, oh, we just got our Series A funding or B funding or C funding or D funding, whatever it is. And then you never hear from them again after they get to the end of, or even halfway through. They just kind of go away. Right. But you hear from the founder, he starts something new right over here. And suddenly somehow he's got a bunch of money. Right. Although the company went up and 100 people got fired. Right. Like, to me, it's just a big game that everybody is playing. And if people don't keep speaking out about it like this, then we're all doomed, because there's a generation coming up that thinks that SaaS is like the literal best thing in the world. It's the only thing that can make you successful, and it's super sexy, and it's really cool to be, and there's so much culture, and it's a lie, all of that, because it's driven by money more than anything else, not driven by people.
Well, and if you look at the numbers, and my numbers are going to be off a little bit, but I think they say that 9 out of every 10 fail of these businesses fail that are venture backed. So I think the question that you've got to ask, how, if you're taking that money, how do you know you're not in the other group of nine, especially if you're following the same playbook that 9 out of 10 fail in? Like, oh, because you're just that much better and because you understand your customers that much better. And oh, by the way, when was the last time you actually had a conversation with a customer? Not when you were pitching the solution and getting them bought into founder vision, but where you actually took a breath and ask some questions about the challenge that they have inside their business and how that's impacting the success of their business, the success of their customers' business, everybody else that's involved in that value chain. Yet 9 out of 10. So which side are you on? And at what point do you say, are we getting distracted by all of these KPIs that demonstrate how well a SaaS business is performing? I was fortunate enough. I worked at a ed tech company, Skillsoft, way back, and we brought in a consultant group. This is early on in my career before I moved into an account executive role, and the consultant group had these these things called R2s. They were called required results, and the R2s were the metrics, the activity metrics that we were going to use to help indicate whether or not we're performing as reps. Yeah, there was a number and there was a quota and there was this other thing out there that you actually deliver inside the organization. But the joke became, hey, I'm knocking it out of the park on my R2s, but I'm sitting at 20% quota. So like these metrics, all of a sudden the metrics look good on a spreadsheet and a graph, but we're not actually making the impact. And we're spending a lot of time reporting for the sake of reporting. So these challenges that we're running into today and that we will run into the future will continue to persist. I think, as we've been talking about before, you get back into that leadership, that not feeling like you have to control everything, but getting to the point where you're actually leading inside organizations. You can help your people fix these things and listen to that. Oh, by the way, so you're actually engaging with a customer conversation, and this is the most common question that comes up in that conversation. And maybe we should actually incorporate something into our communication to help enable our customers there, rather than say, hey, what kind of discount can we give this month to get that deal done or this quarter done? Because we've got a number that we got to hit.
Yeah, I think the biggest disconnect is that we measure the success of our product based on how much of it we're selling, and we're not looking at the sales side of it and going, how is our sales process impacting people, relevant to people, fixing problems in general, right? Because most of the time what we're really offering is just a competitive product to a way that somebody already does it in most cases, especially in that founder startup world that I see, right? Sure, there's some cool innovative stuff out there, but most of the time somebody says, we have the best of this thing or the only of this thing. And I go see it, I'm like, no, you don't. Right. I had somebody one time call me and say, hey, I want to show you this entire concept that I came up with. I won't say what it is, because I want to respect this person. And
sure.
But literally 2 months before this, someone else showed me the same thing. Right. And their product, someone else's product is already in production and being sold. Right. And this person was telling me there's nothing like this on the market. And I was like, you got to do a little bit more research then, buddy. And I think that's the problem, right? Is that we all just assume that our thing is the best and that it's the only thing, right? Instead of saying, wait a second, like it doesn't matter what our thing is. Are we really thinking about the people that would be using our thing? Or are we just saying, hey, this is really cool and we need to go and educate everybody on it, because once they see it and they learn about it, they're going to go, whoa, this is like sliced bread, like way better than, just a regular loaf that I got to cut myself. This is crazy. It's like, it's almost dumb, what innovation looks like today. And furthermore, like to go back to the statement, I think we have disconnected from things like walking into an office and saying, hi, my name is Dale. And I know this is strange because it's the year 2022, but I'm here to meet the people that work here because I sell a product. But ultimately what it does is it fixes things inside of this office of 57 people, and it from this process to that process, from this department to that department, And today is just literally me saying, I'm going to be pursuing you. I don't need a meeting. I don't need you to tell me everything. I just want to cultivate something with you. And sure, like I'm dumbing down, what I would really truly do in a cold call to an extent, but that's ultimately what you're explaining to people when you meet them where they are in their environment to understand what you can fix, how you can help, and ultimately where you can serve. And we don't do that anymore. Instead, we just go, oh, let's make a really good accounting software that will sell to every tax dude and their mom across the United States because they need this. Right. And sure, maybe we talk to a couple people, Mike. It's like ultimately we can't say that everybody is just, in a lab concocting a software that's never been seen by anybody or they've never gotten any feedback from it at all. Right. But even when people go out and do it, and you and I, because we're in this space, right, we see it all the time. People come to us all the time. They're like, so we interviewed 10 people in the industry and this is what they said. And then they show you the product and you're like, wait, did you even hear what they said though? Because like what you just told me and what you're showing me is kind of like, yeah, this is what they said. And so we took that and we're like, well, it would be way cooler like this. And to me, it's like that. No one cares. Like no one cares, right? You painted it red. You painted the blue thing red and nobody cares. Like, seriously.
It is, and there's a process that you can go through to figure this stuff out, but you've got to ask questions and then listen. And you have to be intentional about the questions you ask, and you have to go deeper into the responses. Because if I want to go talk to a bunch of friends and family and figure out whether or not people struggle with something or are interested in this thing, and I'm talking to people who I know who care about me and they don't want me to feel bad, they may say, yeah, sure. Everybody, yeah, I see where that works. Oh, that sounds really interesting. But if we forget to ask the question about, okay, how are you solving it today? Do you really need to solve it differently? What would happen if you did this? How would you actually pay for something like this? We miss on those questions when we do general market research from a marketing perspective, when we don't bring the sales side into the equation. And that's where I think we get, and worse, it's not just about missing on with the customers. We then get feedback from investors who say, oh yeah, that's new. That's interesting. That's got this huge TAM. Like imagine if we just get a percentage of that TAM. And you realize you just built something that nobody really cares about or that somebody else has already solved for. And the reality was the reason the person who has the problem inside the organization wasn't able to solve for it with their own thing was because they didn't have the right resources to go out and figure out that there was a solution out there. So they decided to build it on their own. And then somebody else said, wow, you could really market that thing and make a bunch of stuff. And we're blinded by our interest in solving for the things that are right in front of us. And we forget to ask others about how they would use it, why they would buy it, what they would do with it, what happens if they don't solve for that problem. And I think to get back to the point that Dale made a bit earlier, we're overcomplicating a lot of this stuff. We can simplify it by asking some very direct, clear questions and then listening to people.
Yeah, humans are complex beings ultimately, and really, like all we have to do is just think about, someone in our life that for let's just say like 6 months was extraordinarily kind and open and nice to us, and then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, right, they just like cut us off and stopped talking to us or treating us extraordinarily rude and the thing is like you can't just draw that information out of somebody because of our complexities. There's a lot of things that get in the way, and ultimately the thing that you did that caused that, if you're not aware as a human of the complexities, you'll miss it. You won't be able to think back and be like, what did I do? Right. Instead, you'll think back and you'll just be like, I don't know what I did. This is crazy. Right. And I've asked them several times, what did I do? And like in their mind, they're like, are you serious? Like you called my adopted daughter, not my daughter, and said she's someone else's. Like there's a lot of the times we just miss the small stuff, right? That is ultimately is extremely complex, right? So to your point, if we ask the right questions and we seek to understand deeply, then the complexity piece, like it becomes basic. Right. Because suddenly it's like, oh, it's this simple to fix all this stuff. Right. It's this simple to think like this. to get to an end result, I didn't realize that it was that easy, because it's as easy as me going back in my mind and going, oh, you know what? I think I know exactly what it is. Calling that person, leaving them a voicemail and saying, I know what I did. And I want to tell you that I thought about it, and I think I'm a terrible person for saying it. And I don't even know why I said that. And I'm really sorry. And whether that person forgives you or not, you've literally beaten the barrier at that point. Now, to where like when they look at it, they'll say they fixed the problem ultimately, even if they decide that you're not preferentially the kind of person that they'd like to take a risk on being around, just in case you call their adopted son not their son, next, right? So, but again, the point being that a lot of the time it's simply just through communication that we can figure out what it is that we need to be doing in order to accommodate people effectively, correctly. And the problem is that like that's hard, right? So people don't do it. Instead, they say, what are the 16 steps I need to do in a sales process in order to get a deal? And just kind of like ignore and forget about everything else. And what takes place in those moments is the status quo takes over. And when the status quo takes over, it's easier for people to just kind of like walk away, because you're not doing anything in my mind that's better than where I'm currently at. And so I'm out. Peace. Right. And I think ultimately like the complexity is what it comes down to, and the humanization of it is that it's something that we have to pay more attention to in general. Like not just saying, what could I do to fix the problem in the market, but like, okay, so the market itself, who is in the market, right? Is it white 65-year-old males on the verge of retirement, right? Is it 50-year-old females that are hitting the CEO mark for the first time in their career, right? Like what is it? What's the culture? How do you define the vertical better? How do you see deeper into it past like they make this widget? And see like it's these people that make this widget, right? And furthermore, like what is the inclusivity or the exclusivity of that marketplace as well too? Because then we can understand things like what makes people feel good ultimately, because like people just going into their office and making a widget every day for 30 years isn't like the thing they said when they were 14 years old they wanted to do when they grew up. I'm sorry, but it's not, right? So instead, if we can understand that they have dreams, you walk in their office and they got a bunch of like exotic cars on the wall, right? That they're still trying to get to collect and to have money to do, right? At some point in their life, like you can be a part of these people's existence, and you can be a part of these people's culture more so than just like fixing a problem, right? Like the rebellion people say all the time, they're like, I love your aesthetic and your brand. Well, like that's by design. It's not an accident or something that just like I felt was preferential. I know the demographic. I know my group of people. I know millennials, right? I and beyond them, I know people that look at things like tech and things like innovation and things like culture and can see this is kind of fun, right? And this is what sales should be. It should be something that I am connected to because I want to create impact. I want to put people first. I want to get rid of negotiations and just fellowship. I want to get rid of pitching and give experiences, right? We have something people desire for themselves. It's not that we're desiring people to do it. We don't care if you don't want to do it, because we know there's a demographic of a majority, a very silent one, but a majority of people out there that see our message and go, God, I wish my boss would let me do that. And because of it, we have something different. And if people thought much riskier like we do, right? And I'm not saying that we're the greatest by any means. We still got plenty of flaws and problems. I mean, we've sucked for the 3.5 years that we've been a business, but thankfully, because we're good at things, we've given people extraordinary outcomes through our process, and we've learned so much through just risking it and saying, let's try it. Right. And ultimately being aware enough to say, like, we got to fix some of this stuff at some point for sure, because it's got to evolve and expand and be something more desirable, right? And be something that's more business centric from the perspective of process and as a startup and everything else. But ultimately, if we sit around and just try to concoct the perfect thing, by the time we go to market, somebody else will have done it, or the perfect thing doesn't exist, period. So we'll think it's perfect, and it really will ultimately suck for everybody else. But it's the blemishes, it's the effort, it's the intrinsic part that people are more bought into. And that's what people miss, right? When they sit back and they say, I want to start a company, I want to build a product, I want to go to market, they miss that piece big time, in my opinion.
How can you help, or how can people get better at observation?
So there's a theory inside of our organization, and even when we talk about knowledge, we talk about networks, we talk about observation, and we talk about wisdom. And one of the pieces of the puzzle that made me so good at sales was that I was very observant. I was listening, I was looking, and I wasn't using all this information to come back to you and make you buy from me. I was using it to understand you better. And because I understood you better, things are different. Like I just got off the phone with one of my students, called me outside of a normal session, just saying like, yo, I just need to talk to you real quick. What's up, man? How's it going? What can I do for you? Right. And he goes, so here's what I know about this guy that's coming in to see me. And he starts telling me, I've been listening, I've been observing. These are the things I found. He loves club soda as a drink. Like when he's like, you want a water? And I go, yeah, he gets a club soda for himself. Right. It is like, I'm paying attention to these things. And to me, like, it was beautiful. I was just listening. And I was like, yeah, man, this is what you need to be doing, right? Because the more that we observe, we actually meet people where they are, right? And when you meet somebody where they are, you can do a lot more with them. And it's less of a gimmick and a move to get them to feel comfortable and more of a familiarity that you're providing for them. Because even if you don't know it, right? Because like if someone loves cars, I know jack about them. But if I use some kind of car, anything medium in my methodology of reaching out to get an appointment or following up or in my nurturing process, or even after the deal is over, right? I send them something and I say, like for the next 5 years, we're together and this is the vehicle that we're driving, right, to get there. Whatever the case is, I don't have to tell that person, oh, by the way, I love cars too, right? I don't have to say that. I can say like, hey, I suck at the car thing, but I did a ton of research because I know you're super into it. And this is what I came up with. And by the way, I think you're even weirder now that I looked into NASCAR and stuff. I'm just like, yeah, you're a strange bird, but I respect you. And I thought that this would be something that could complement our relationship because ultimately I want to serve. And people can't think like that today. They're like, I sent the guy a purple dress for his wife and, XYZ for his daughter because I looked on their Facebook and I saw these things. Like that guy just thinks you're a creep, right? He also sees that you're just doing stuff to get an appointment or to get the deal or to make him feel good so you can slip in another $100, right, for your commission. Ultimately, people have a really hard time separating from the outcome and just saying like, I could spend $5,000 to acquire this account that could pay me $100,000, right? And I might lose that $5,000 and not make the $100,000. People have a hard time with that. They're like, well, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna fight really hard and try to win, right? And the word fight sucks in sales because it's too literal. Nobody wants to be in a fight with you, bro. And you're the only one fighting in most cases, right? Like we think so differently than what a true salesperson should and a true starter or a founder should, or a true CEO or CFO, or really like we've become like boxed into our roles. And this is what you do. And this is how you think. And don't leave this box or you're fired. And as soon as you do that to people, bro, it goes back to what you were saying about authenticity. You choke it. Right. Because the argument out there that's like, who cares about authenticity? It doesn't matter anyway. Right. Yes, it does. It matters because you all think it doesn't because it's so absent and business still happens. But when it shows up, the things that happen are beyond any metric you could ever measure. Right. The first time I sat down with my boss and he was trying to figure out the aftermarket effect that I've had on the organization, because like, it's easy to do revenue and service and the aftermarket, bro. I mean, it was so big, but what I had created from an aftermarket standpoint from our organization that like it increased the value of the organization by like 30% on top of what they were already worth. Right. It was massive. And to think about like those types of outcomes, no, everybody tries to instead like create and curate this thing that would take you there, right? Instead of just going, let's just risk human connection. Let's risk authenticity. Let's risk creativity. Let's risk stepping outside of the box and just see what happens. And the best part about when people think like that is if it doesn't work, you learn. And when you learn, you literally grow. And when you grow, you literally have the identity of what is next to hit that successful mark that you want.
Innovation doesn't come from doing the same thing that everybody else has done over time. I mean, it doesn't. And if you think you can pick up a book like a Predictable Revenue or some of these other ones that are out there that people will buy into because that's the playbook of how so-and-so did it, and you don't have the context for how they did it or what was happening in that market or what was happening in the environment around them or what was happening wherever, you're trying to go to market with somebody else's recipe without the right ingredients. And it's, I mean, imagine trying to bake. And I'm not a baker. I cook stuff. So I just throw things together and I'm really bad at recipes. So never ask me how I made something taste good. It just does. But I'm not a baker. Now there are some people that are bakers. I know that about me. So I cook. When you're out there and you're in this environment, one of the cool things about being a sales professional, a success professional, a person who's helping customers be successful is you don't have to be a baker. You can be a cook and you can start to cook together. It's really powerful stuff. Dale, why do we've kind of gone around on a number of different things around why people struggle with it. There's control, there's leadership challenges, there's outside influences that are pushing things. We detach ourselves from the actual outcome that our customer is looking for. We forget to observe and learn. Why do people treat roles like this differently than the way that they treat life?
It's a really good question, and like I get a little too worked up on this one because I really don't understand why people do it. But realistically, these are the things that it's all going to sound negative, but it's true. It's easier to disconnect yourself from the personal side and strictly say, well, this was for business, because now you can lie, you can cheat, you can steal. Right. And I know those are harsh words, but like how many people listening right now in their career and in their lifetime said a little white flub at some point to get the deal. Right. I don't have to live with that on my conscience personally, because I was taught the integral side of business. And I was taught that, hey, as soon as you lie, it'll come back. Right. And I even saw instances of it happening. You know, for example, there was a contract that at the company that acquired my father, there was a contract that was in play that was going to be canceled when it came to the end of the agreement. There was no question about it, because the sales rep had literally taken the signature, gone back to the office, whited out the dates and the total commitment number from 36 months to 60 months. That's an extra 2 years of commitment. Right. And literally locked this person in for an extra 2 years of financial obligation as well, too, which didn't double their number, but got right under it and made them a buttload of money on their commission and completely screwed the prospect. And that's like it's a rough example, right? But listen, there are times when someone has said to you, sitting that is listening right now, sitting across the table from you, will this do this? And to make it easier, you said yes. Right. And knowing that like they would probably never even try to do that in the first place. Right. Like, I'll just say yes. It'll make it easier. Right. It has happened in the most like innocent ways, and then the most like grueling and manipulative ways. But that's why people separated. They separated because it's easier to disconnect from people. It's easier to disconnect emotionally. When you're in business, to just make money, get paid, drive fast, go hard, live in the big house, get all the stuff you think is so appropriate in life, and then move on. Right. Like, here's the thing. I know 55-year-old guys who have been atheists their whole life and made tons of money, right? And had like a completely different perspective on politics as normal people, right? That have like stayed in their lane really hard since they were 21, right? At 55, reevaluating their life because they're on their fifth marriage, and 2 of their kids from their second wife don't talk to them anymore. And they're not happy, and the money is there. Yeah. But like when they want to get a beer, they can't even text a friend anymore to go. The only friends that they do have are the people we're talking about that'll sit at that table with them, muck it up and lie half the time, that they can't trust, that they can't see beyond, just like having a beer relationship with. Right. And so what I'm really saying here ultimately is like, we don't think about the consequences of the way that we live our lives until we get to a point where it's too late. And listen, it's never too late. I will say that too. It's never too late to decide that business is personal. It's never too late to make that choice. But I do remember a time, like the best time ever, when someone had said that to my dad, and he turned to them and he said, "That's not true." He said, "Business pays my mortgage." Business provides the toys for my kids to be happy back at home. It gives me a pool guy so my wife doesn't have to clean it and be aggravated with me when I get home. And like it creates things in my personal life that are extraordinarily helpful and easier and more fun because it's business, right? And so I had a completely different perspective of it growing up, and that's why I feel this way. But ultimately, I think it starts right here with us. Is that like people separated because it's easier, and that's the bottom line, right? It's risky to add yourself into the equation. It's risky to tell the buyer, I think that that's stupid, because it's the blunt, honest truth, right? I just want to be honest, right? That whole statement, I hate it. Just be blunt with people all the time because that's who you are. And love is blunt, bro, right? Cherishing somebody means that you literally care about them beyond anything that they would ever comprehend or understand. And if you want to live a good, fulfilled life as a human, cherish people, right?
And
And
if you're
because we can't connect with those things, bro, we just call it business instead.
and if you're doing something that matters, something that is going to make an impact on others, and you find the people that it's going to make an impact on, and you confirm that it's going to make that kind of impact on them, good things really happen. It's when you start to put yourself first and say, well, I need this number, or I need this done, or I need to move this thing along, or whatever other agenda comes in. If you start putting yourself in front of others in that kind of environment, you're not only are you going to create tension in that relationship, you're going to create tension inside your business when you go back to the engineering group and say, hey, and just to let you know, I told them that we could do this. When can we do that? Or when is that going to happen? And all that does is create more tension, more frustration, more waste. Dale, awesome conversation. Thank you for the time. Doing the work that you do gives you the chance to be able to jump on an airplane and go out and see Orlando City, in Orlando, going from East Tennessee. I didn't realize they had airplanes in East Tennessee. Do they have East? He's got his. If you watch him on Twitter, right, that's where I see you most of the time. Some a little bit on LinkedIn, but mostly on Twitter. It's you've got pictures of Orlando City players taking selfies with your phone, with you and your family in the background, like you're
Die hard.
so they were a club team originally, like a club team before getting into MLS, because Phoenix Rising, and I'm not a soccer fan. I mean, I've coached little kid soccer, I've done that kind of stuff, but and I understand the game. There's a ball, there's 11 people, you try to get the ball from into a net, and the goal really is big, and actually should be a little bit bigger than it is, so that more points can be scored. But so we've got a club team out here called Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, you
Is
got
that what how Orlando started? Is that
it was like one of your player coaches out there is Drogba. Drogba is a legend in the EPL, and he played in MLS, right? And some of the goals of that is like you bring somebody like that into the USL club, or
okay.
I think it's USL 2 actually that they're in, but because they're minor league technically. Yep. Like in the States, that's how you look at it. It is a club team technically, like if you were to look overseas and how that works, because there's relegation, but there's no relegation here. You have to buy a franchise and be accepted by Major League Sports to get into it. There is no like you play in the pro league or you play in a step down league, right? So you're in a step down, but ultimately that's what we started as in 2011 in Orlando. The team was actually in Austin for a couple of years. They came to Orlando and in 2011 with Phil and Kay Rollins, and in 2015 they win MLS. It took 4 years, but we won 3 trophies in those 4 years, 2 championships. And so we were a winning team. We were very used to winning, very used to like a culture of just like destroying and slaughtering 7-0, And so the MLS was like, this is a no brainer to let this club in. Right. But we sucked win the first 4 years, but these last 3 have been fantastic. We've been in the playoffs every season. We just won the Open Cup championship. So we have our first piece of hardware, as an MLS team, and we're coming for more. So watch out.
What's the culture like in a stadium, in an arena like that? Like, is there,
can't even describe it, bro. I mean, like in the States, it's different than like in England or in France or in Germany. Like all the leagues have a different flavor to an extent, but no matter what, like they're all just like hardcore, right? It's hardcore people playing hardcore sports, and it's epic, right? Because ultimately, like you've got people screaming a bunch of obscenities and curse words. And I mean, it's intense, bro. Like it goes all over the spectrum too, because like it is still family friendly fun ultimately at the end of the day, but there's a passion there for your club more than anything, right? So it goes beyond the players, it goes beyond the sport itself, and it's like the club, it's your crest, it's your city, it's something that's very intimate to the people. And because of that, there's like there's just a passion that you cannot describe. You know, you could be sitting with your 5-year-old kid next to a guy yelling the F word, and you don't care because you're like, I get it, I know why you're doing this, because you love this more than your own life, you know. And that's really the best way to describe, you know, the intensity and the passion that comes with, you know, an MLS club. So
Dale, we've got a little bit long. Two more questions. One, where can people find out more about what you're working on?
www. I was going to say something else, but www.thesalesrebellion.com. We just put up a brand new website. We haven't told anybody. So like, I'm giving you a little bit of an exclusive here. Please be careful to like going and clicking a bunch of buttons and then telling me that they don't work, because I already know they don't work. Like, it's just up there to like give people the new aesthetics, see what we're offering now: group coaching, team coaching, individual coaching, fractional support, stuff that we've got up on the website now. It's much sexier, much sleeker. So if you want to go there and check it out, the resources are all there. You can see what we're offering, what we're up to, what's coming in the future. That's the best place to do it. But if you want a content stream of what's going on, just stay on LinkedIn or stay on Twitter, and you'll see me talking about what, you know, we're doing behind the scenes.
And what do you want to leave everybody with before I do the outro?
I would just tell every single person that these kind of conversations don't just happen on a whim, right? I met Mike through the freaking internet because we both can literally meet on a common ground, not eHarmony, of what we believe change looks like inside of B2B. It goes beyond sales. It goes down to like the actual human behaviors and who we are as people and what we're building from a community standpoint, and how we're putting culture first, not just a fake version of it on a ping pong table, but real culture that makes some people uncomfortable to talk about, because it creates growth and it creates more acceptance and it creates love ultimately, which is what we want to get back to. And so if you're listening today, you're not just listening to Dale, the guest on this podcast with Mike. You're listening to two guys that do what they do, that love what they do, and that are committed to making changes inside of our industries. And so if anybody is listening and thinking to themselves like, man, I wish I could do stuff like this, trust me when I say you can, because Mike and I are just normal dudes that decided one day that we were going to be idiots and step out of our comfort zones and leave our jobs and do our own thing, right? Ultimately. So that would be my encouragement for anybody listening. Like, you have much more you can do, I should say, much more than you think you're capable of. Step outside of the box of business, step into the light of a rebellion, and start changing the game as much as you possibly can, or that you want to, inside of your walk, and enjoy the fulfillment that comes with that.
And when you embrace it, you will be shocked by the magic that happens.
Oh yeah, baby.
You'll be shocked by the magic.
Oh yeah, baby.
If you know somebody who would enjoy this podcast, enjoy this conversation, get something out of this discussion, please share it with them. You can share it. Let Dale and I know via LinkedIn and Twitter. We're both really active there. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process? Yeah.